I'm going to be a dad. I'm trying to build a business. I'm trying to stay in great shape, get in even better shape. And I thought I'd give a little bit of an insight into how I go about that balancing act when trying to build the life of our dreams. We're going to have quite a few different priorities. You hear a lot of people say that it's difficult, and I'm trying to embrace the difficulty in doing everything that needs to be done to build the kind of life that I want to be living. So I thought I'd break down exactly what my structure looks like to do that, in the hopes that maybe there's something that you can take away from it. Things that I used to do that no longer serve me. And I think that that all actually starts with being crystal clear. You can't hope to find the best possible path to somewhere if you don't actually know what you're aiming for. One of the biggest breakthroughs I had last year was just getting really clear on what that dream life actually looked like. Everyone has a different balance, so to speak, where it's not necessarily, 50% life, 50% fitness. It can, for some people, it'll be more 25-75. For some people, it'll be more 75-25, the complete opposite. So the trick is, I think, first just getting clear on what that dream life looks like to you. Because when you know what you're aiming for, you can much more easily find out the appropriate steps to take today to get you a little bit closer to achieving that. If fitness is going to be a top priority, then you already know that more sacrifices will need to be made in other areas to facilitate that, and vice versa. For me, the thing that really didn't come very naturally was business. So I tried to focus as much of my attention on that side of things, and that means that my fitness, as a consequence, takes a much more kind of like stripped back approach to allow me to focus on those other things that I need to work on a little bit more. That's trying to be, balanced to achieve that kind of mix of things I want later on in life. So I think that's going to be step one. First, just getting really clear. When you know what your identity should become, when you know what kind of person you're aiming to be, you understand what that kind of person is doing, and therefore what you can start doing to emulate that. And form follows function. If you start to incorporate those habits, you will, by consequence, become that kind of person. So I think that's going to be step one. Now, how that started to look was in terms of thinking about my business, thinking about in terms of service, fulfillment, client numbers. That started to then shape how my week looks, and something that I've found massively useful. If you have more of a demanding kind of corporate career, then this will maybe look a little bit different because you might be doing more repetitive days. But similarly, it kind of checks out to think about, like, what does your week look like? Monday to Friday versus the weekend. In my case, I like to get a huge chunk of my client fulfillment, client calls, check-ins done on Monday and Tuesday, which means that Wednesday, Thursday is a little bit more kind of content and the front end business stuff. And then Friday is kind of that more flexible day to deal with chaos. Now I get the luxury of preparing if there's something a little bit more chaotic happening, because that adaptability is really, really important. That's something that I'd actually jotted down as kind of like a separate point to talk about, because structure is great. Structure means that you know what you're aiming for. If you're just going out there and winging it, you're going to be wasting loads of time. Like the best little hack that I started doing was actually just using this whiteboard a little bit more frequently, because it would get to like content day and I'd be going back to the plan and thinking like, okay, well, which ones of these do I need to sort out for next week? What do I need to record? What do I need to edit? And when I just started noting down on the whiteboard, next week's content, this, that, because usually I'll plan like a month of content in advance, my YouTube, my Instagram, things like that. So I always know Mondays are more focused on that, Tuesdays that. But then when I'm on the weekly basis, recording it just a week in advance instead of a month in advance, I found it very useful to be like, okay, here's all this week's content, little tick box next to it, recorded, edited, bosh. It just meant that I wasn't wasting then 10 minutes, actually just getting what I could get done way sooner. And it just allowed me to be way more efficient with my time. And time management is, of course, a huge component of juggling those things. We only have 24 hours in a day. So if you want to be aiming for a certain standard of life, that requires you to be able to allocate the appropriate time to each of those areas that you are trying to nurture. So for me, that little hack, just getting things down, getting yourself nice and prepared, and once again, just clear on the damn goal, was something that was just a quick hack that made a huge difference. It also allowed me to offload a lot of stress, because instead of waking up through the night thinking like, oh my god, I've got this due, I've got that due, need to get this done, that done tomorrow. If if you've just gotten it out of your head onto paper, you will sleep like a baby in comparison. And stress is number one, the killer of health. Only bad things come from unmanageable amounts of stress. And of course, well, sleep is very, very important as well for you to actually be able to perform at your highest and get shit done. So whiteboards, lists, really, really good quick hacks. I've already forgotten where I was up to, but oh yeah, weekly structure. So for me, it's kind of that idea of like, look, what gets done on these days? Because similarly, you know, week time for a lot of people is going to be a little bit more rigid. It's going to be a little bit more work rather than play. And weekends, it's that kind of case of like, don't play so hard that it writes off your work for the next week and undoes some of the work that you did the week prior. But sometimes that's kind of the split that allows you to kind of balance. It's thinking about, okay, these days it's a little bit more for this. If you know that, you know, you work from home or something, right? And then some days you're in the office. If you got to commute, I've got clients who travel for work quite a bit. So, you know, their office is maybe on the other side of the country, literally. And it's sometimes not feasible to train on those days due to how long the commute is, gym closing times, things like that. So you already know that like on those other days when you're working from home, those are going to be the easiest ones to set out for your training. Having that structure is really, really key. So when I'm designing my clients' programs from scratch, that's the kind of detail that I want from them. I want to understand what your schedule looks like, what constraints are you working with, so that we can find the right balancing act that's going to allow you to stay consistent to actually see the result through. But if you are reliant on things being absolutely perfect, then if something comes up a little bit different and out of routine, then naturally that's going to throw you off and you're not going to be able to stay consistent with it. And the harsh truth is that if you're aiming high, things are going to come up that are unexpected all the damn time. So being able to deal with that is absolutely key. Now, for me, when it comes to workload, now if I have a bunch of clients sign up last minute, I know that Friday is kind of my what now needs to get done day. Now, I try to keep the workload a little bit more minimal to stop that overwhelm, but that is a day that's a little bit less planned for that reason. It gives me time to kind of adapt to the situation, quickly make a plan, and then execute. If I've got a bunch of new clients to set up, if I've got a bunch of additional sales calls I didn't have time for on previous days, things like that, having a little contingency day is going to be key. Adaptability when it comes to fitness can work very much in the same way. When I'm writing a client's training plan, for example, I'll actually use training splits that mean that we can shuffle their training days around in the week a little bit so that there is that room for, oh crap, I wasn't able to get it done today, but over the space of the week, if we zoom out, I want to create a system that across the week, they can still get everything done that they need to, even if some days naturally are going to be worse than others. When it then comes to managing family alongside that, or relationships in general, things like enjoyment, food, the adaptability to not be eating out of a Tupperware all the time is going to be a massively crucial one. You don't want to be, having to be super perfect with diet, eating out of Tupperwares all the time. So having a plan that's adaptable and actually accounts for, some meals out is going to be key. My guys get a full framework on how to do this. And again, that looks different for all my clients. Some guys go out more for, business dinners. Some guys have a usual that they will go to after the office. Some guys, it depends on what phase they're in, fat loss or muscle gain. Depending on that, how much preparation work and calorie banking they have to do prior. Do we need to save some calories, or are our hunger levels in a spot where through the week we can dig a little bit harder so that, on our weekends we can eat a little bit more, things like that. The point being, figure out what the nature of that chaos is. Is it workload? Is it meals out and off plans? And depending on what the root cause of the problem is, the solution will then present itself to attack that root cause. The solution needs to be something that actually fits. So that, I think, is how you start to kind of tie it all together. And then the real kind of overarching theme is that idea of time management, whether it's, thinking about how your week looks like, thinking about the schedule on a day-to-day basis, be it little hacks to save time so you can allocate appropriately. Time management's super key. And whether you're using things like this, worked really nicely for one of my freelancer clients. And his time management was all over the place. So when it came to fitting in his training, it was a nightmare. And I literally had him like, look, you know that you have the freedom to do what you wish with your workload. The drawback is if you're prone to procrastination, everything gets shoved into an even smaller window of time, and you can't take back time. At that point, you're then screwed. So having an actual framework just for time management itself, be it things like, time blocking, be it things like a little cool little hack, the 2-minute rule. If it takes you 2 minutes to do something, do it there and then. Do not allocate time for it, just get it done, because 2 minutes isn't going to make a difference. If I get a message from a client, if I see it, I'm just going to respond to it if it doesn't merit like a massively long-winded response, because I know that if I procrastinate, then I check my phone later, and then if I've got 5 messages from clients, that's actually going to eat into my day. That's going to take away from some of the other stuff. That's what's going to take away from family time. That's what's going to, maybe hold me back from going to the gym. Then I have to push it to tomorrow, and then it's this whole big mess. So time management is absolutely key. Dig specifically into the time management side of things, not just thinking about fitness. On the note of time management though, then there are things that you can do to make fitness much more time efficient. When it comes to training, obviously the last video that I did was on kind of my pillars that underpin effective, efficient training. I use science to basically create better training so that I don't have to waste my time doing lots of things that aren't getting me reward for my hard work. What I want to do is basically focus on those low-hanging fruits that are going to get me 90% of the results with only half the workload. To me, that's a favorable trade-off. I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder anymore. I'm not trying to get as unbelievably jacked as possible. I just want efficiency. I want great results, and I want to be able to focus on the other side of things. So drawing from an evidence-based approach is a really, really good idea to do this, because you know that those things work. They've been proven time and time again in the studies, and provided that you can apply them correctly, then there's a higher chance that they will work from you than just taking random advice. Everyone's got an opinion. How do you actually know which opinion is correct? When it comes to nutrition, things like meal preps can be hit or miss. Meal preps can be, of course, restrictive because you're going to be eating the same things, but what we do in my coaching, I've got this idea that I call the hybrid method, which is basically, if I'm to sum it up, is basically kind of an idea that most lean proteins are going to have a similar amount of calories and protein, so they can all kind of be exchanged. So it's this kind of mix and match of where, chicken, rice could very much also be the same as like beef and pasta, which could very much be the same like macronutrient makeup for those meals as something like some white fish and potato. So if I have kind of this rough framework for portion sizes for those main ingredients, little things like, sauces, seasonings, provided I'm not using anything super creamy and high calorie, I can basically kind of create whichever tasty meals I want out of that. So then halfway through the week, I can then prep another bunch of dinners, and it'll all kind of come out to exactly the same. So that's been a real kind of low barrier to tell my clients kind of, stay prepped, stay accurate with their targets, eat good food. And then if you couple that with those other, adaptable strategies for meals out and things like that, they manage to stay nice and consistent even with everything that's going on in their lives. So that's just a little bit of an idea of some of the strategies that we use, that I use, and I've tried to kind of pass on to my clients in the most applicable manner possible, to balance all the things to create that dream life. But if there's one thing that you got to do right after this video, it's just sit for a minute in silence, get clear on what you want that life to look like, visualize it. Where are you living? What are you doing? Who with? And from that, you will then know more about the approach that suits you. But if you watch this video and that dream life sounds like, well, like these kind of approaches might gel quite well for it, then of course I'd love to chat a little bit further, see if we would be a good fit to work together. Feel free to check out the website below. You can apply through there, or just DM me the word ready on Instagram. We can have a chat, see if I could hopefully be the right fit for you. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.